Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising as we contemplate today the kind of education that we need to enable humanity to indeed rise to meet the challenges of our time. As we begin, I want to reference the breaking news that just came out of The Hague just a few hours ago by the International Criminal Court about the charge of genocide against Israel brought by the South African government. This is a landmark case. The point of the ruling today was to basically accept or not accept South Africa's accusations. And it was an extraordinary moment that's been anticipated for many, many weeks. And the finding was startling. The court found that there is plausibility to the charge of genocide and ordered Israel to stop engaging in any actions that could be interpreted as such, and also to protect any and all evidence that is necessary for the court as it adjudicates the charge of genocide against Israel from damage or intentional loss. The court also mandated that Israel open up the humanitarian relief efforts and take all measures to ensure that moving forward, the Israeli military would not engage in the mass killing of civilians, which, as we know from the latest data, been 26,000 killed as we convene this program. Nearly 200 have been killed in the last 24 hours, mostly 70% women and children. So we're witnessing indiscriminate mass murder in Gaza. And the International Criminal Court, while it did not call for a ceasefire, which is what the South Africans had asked for, and most of the rest of the world outside the United States and Israel are demanding, and nevertheless, as an Israeli minister who commented said, Israel has been given a yellow card about genocide. And that's very important for us to take in as a human community. And what was striking about the ruling is that on every charge, the vote was either 15-2 or 16-1. And in a couple of the counts, even the Israeli judge sided with the South Africans, as did the American judge. So we're witnessing today a milestone in the activation of the world conscience. The International Criminal Court is a body of the United Nations. And so Israel, along with every member of the United Nations, is bound by the court ruling. It will be interesting to see how Israel responds. Prime Minister Netanyahu issued a statement saying that Israel will continue as it has been without regard to the International Criminal Court. And we'll see in 30 days whether the Israeli government responds as the court has demanded about the actions that it is now mandated by the court to take, especially the delivering of humanitarian relief and the cessation of essentially mass murder against civilian populations. I want to also note the execution of Kenneth Smith, in the United States by the state of Alabama, in what on an individual level is as egregious as what Israel is doing in Gaza. The state of Alabama experimented with a new type of killing, a nitrogen gas. The U.S. Constitution protects all U.S. citizens against cruel and unusual punishment. And the spiritual advisor of Mr. Smith, who witnessed the execution last night, said that Mr. Smith struggled and convulsed on the execution table for a full 22 minutes, which is, by any standard, cruel and unusual punishment. So interesting that the one country that's backing Israel to the hilt, all the weapons that Israel is using have made in USA on them. The US has been the one country in all the world that has vetoed the legislation by the Security Council of the United Nations demanding a ceasefire. So it's an extraordinary synchronicity that right at the moment that the International Criminal Court tells the Israelis to stop what the court is stating as plausibly genocide, the United States is allowing this kind of activity within its own borders. And I raise this because we are at a moment when this kind of consciousness must be held as abhorrent to any notion of civilized behavior. Surely the human race, looking back just over the last 100 years, let alone recorded human history, must repent of genocide and cruel executions like the world did in the 1850s and the 1860s around slavery, as the world has done in releasing women from being chattel and giving them the right to vote and the right to own property and the right to be full members of human society, as the world is now doing laboriously and tortuously around people of various gender fluidities and sexual persuasions. Surely we have come to a moment when each and every individual, whether Jew or Palestinian, whether Russian or Ukrainian, whether charged with murder or charged with any crime, needs the full protection and right to be who they are, and even in death, mandated by a court, to be executed with civility if the nation insists on it. But the entire world conscience speaks out against capital punishment now, against genocide. And so it's with some sadness that I came into the call today, and with sadness that I report something which should not exist anywhere in our world. It has no place. This underscores the importance of Einstein's great insight that the consciousness that produces the problem cannot solve it. We need a new way of orienting ourselves, not only in relationship to each other. We're all human beings. We may be different colors. We may be doing this or that, but surely we can respect each other with the same respect we want everyone to accord to ourselves. And that can only be done through education. This was an observation by the philosopher Plato 2,600 years ago in the Republic, where he said the only way to liberate ourselves from the scourge of tyranny and the barbarism of violence is to raise the next generation, our children and our children's children, in an educational system that imbues them with the morality, with the spirit of the philosopher. And a philosopher is that person who so loves wisdom, so loves the natural law of who we are, that the person engages in a spirit of genuine inquiry, genuine exploration, understanding, as all wise people do, that we're in a living system within which each of us has a part and each of us has a role to play in harmony with the larger polity. And that, according to Plato and also his student Aristotle, is the meaning of politics, how we humans in groups interact with each other in such a way that we produce harmony among ourselves, so that each one of us can engage in the philosophical life and inquiry into wisdom. So we're very pleased synchronistically today to have Ann Adams join us, who is a PhD and have been working on educational matters with Fortune 500 companies for over 3 decades. Her experiences range from being a student, a teacher, a school administrator, a corporate consultant on education in many domains, nationally and internationally. I've recently got to know Ann and was struck by her deep passion for how we can educate ourselves more expansively and more deeply to enable humanity to rise as it should and must at this hour of need. So, Ann, I want to welcome you to join us, and Ann will make a few preliminary remarks, and then she has a PowerPoint she wants to share. And then, as we always do, I'll circle back and we'll engage in dialogue. And then Ann will be joining the after chat. So that's something that we can all look forward to. So Ann, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I just have to take a long, deep breath, and I really invite all of us, maybe even 3 or 4 really long, deep breaths, to allow what you've been speaking, Jim, to really get inside. I mean, if I can ask any one of you in terms of whether you've ever done any kind of speaking, can you imagine coming in to be speaking after the introduction that Jim presented? I mean, it really calls forth a very different depth and quality of my speaking to you today. You can tell I'm a little moved and maybe even close to tears in a way, in the sense of, oh my gosh, what an incredible example of humanity not rising, of what he's been speaking. So I want all of us, and just thank you all so much for taking the time to come together. To me, this conversation about educating for humanity rising, to me, it's the most important conversation that any one of us could be having right now. So as you take a deep breath, I'm going to be doing just a short process with all of us, because it has to do with you and I really allowing us to get much more related to our own humanity. So as we end this conversation, I'm going to have it be really alive. And I'm going to start with this deep breathing. Notice how, when you take a deep breath, that it gets right into your lungs, your chest, and your heart. You take a deeper breath, it gets into your belly. And I'm just going to ask you, take that deep breath and then just notice what body sensations are there when you go through your body. What do you notice? I noticed as Jim was speaking, my heart was just like in and out and in and out. And I just was feeling like constricted and then open. But just notice for yourself at this moment in time as we begin this conversation together. And by the way, I think of this conversation really like an inquiry. It's really exploring. It's really wondering about what all this is. So it isn't about me speaking at you or to you particularly. It's really with each other. So as you take these deep breaths, just notice what's so for you in any kind of body sensations that you have. How did what Jim spoke and how he was speaking about what's been going on is just, how is it showing up in your body? You know, you and I have this body that's so intelligent. It's all the molecules and the atoms that are here. They've been here forever. And so do we listen to that body of ours? Just take another moment, and those breaths really give you access to all the parts of your body that's there. And then just take those breaths and see if you can't just allow it to settle, to be calming. And then I'm going to move us into the whole emotional, which is also, if you think about what Jim was speaking and all of the imagery that was there, just notice, what's your emotional intelligence providing for you right now? What are your feelings? What are there? Using that long, deep breath that you have to really access that. You may notice your emotions that are there and then how they relate to your body. And next, I'd like us to go into really looking at the mental intelligence that we have. You know, it shows up often as our thoughts or even that little voice that speaks to us on a regular basis. And as you take your long, deep breaths now, just notice what's there. What's your mental intelligence saying to you? It may have all sorts of different things that are saying, and we want to be present to all of them. Just keep allowing whatever experience is there. I notice my own humanity right now. I feel like I do want to burst into tears. You know, I'm really looking at like, well, what's my relationship with humanity and my own humanness? And again, the invitation during this particular process is for you and I to get very present to our own humanity, the way it shows up in our physical, our emotional, our mental. And then the last place, as you're breathing deeply, I'd like you to visit a little, is your spiritual intelligence. You know, you and I have this incredible to have with our human spirits. That spirit that sometimes can step back and watch and notice all of what's going on, that has relationships with nature, the cosmos. So just be a little bit more allowing more and more of that spiritual intelligence to come in. Just notice that's part of where we want to jump off from too, is to begin to ask, how do we develop all of these different intelligences? How do we live our lives going forward from this talk? Where each one of these intelligences, we have our focus on them. We begin to notice, oh, we can develop them. Oh, we actually can do all sorts of things to make sure they're very integrated. That physical intelligence, it connects with the mental, that the mental connects with the emotional and the spiritual. So we walk around, there's a level of a coherence here, so that when we speak about humanity, we can start with you and I. Here I am. I'm a human being, and I'm feeling the way that I'm feeling right now. So as we go forth here, I just want to make sure you're clear that we're really looking at, what's it feel like, that humanity? What does that feel like? What's that like? How do I relate to it? And then from our conversation today, to begin to expand it and expand and expand it. So I'm just going to be quiet just for another moment. So all of what I've spoken so far, it has an opportunity to really let it in all the way through your body. Just really be there with that experience right now. Thank you. I'm just noticing at the moment, before I'm going to go on to the program that I've created to be with you about, is how extraordinary it is that we're all here together today. I know we're going to be able to see each other later on, but there's something energetically going on here. I can feel it. I'm inviting the rest of you to feel it. Like all the people that are here, all we're here together and we're having this conversation with each other from all over the country, from all over the world. Just to have you and I be really present to that. And again, I'm inviting you to relate to what we're doing, the words I'm speaking, the experiences that you're having, is this could be the most important conversation you and I can be in right now. So I'm going to begin to share my screen. And this first is just a blank piece of paper, and then we're going to go to the next page right now. Hang on one second while I get a little technology going here. So I'm just going to, we're trying to take my thing next to it. So I'm going to stop sharing that one. You know, every now and then you think, oh, something's going to happen like this. So let's just see. The next one we're going to look at is this one. Okay, here we go from our current slide. So what we're doing together today is we're really looking at all of these areas that shape who we are, the quality of the culture that we co-create together, and the world in which we live every day. So I started a little bit, but I'll continue with these 4 areas. So the first is the integration. It's the recognition of the integrality of the individual, our physical, our emotional, our mental, our spiritual. It is the integration and integrality of the beingness of humans. And the next area we're going to take a look at together is what is the actual source of our education? You know, what really is the source of our education and what has been the source of our education? We're going to really look at both of those and begin to get a sense of the difference that's there. And then we'll go back and begin to see how do we take what we're learning today and the experiences we're having today and really learning much more about how we connect with ourselves, how we connect with other people, nature, animals, the cosmos, the universe, and this whole notion of the energetic field that's there. How do we connect? And then given your experience of our time together today, what contributions would you like to be making to the rising of humanity? So the first question we're really looking at, and I'm looking at source. And when I think of source, I think of the foundation, you know, something that really is holding what it is. What's the source? From where does it come? And Jim mentioned Plato, but I want to have you looking to see, like, what do you say? What has it been? And what I would say for this definition, if you look at education, it actually has a number of definitions. But this definition, educare, is to train or mold. It's the process of facilitating learning, acquiring knowledge and skills and values and beliefs, but it relates to learners as vessels to fill. And here's just a really very fun, but it's a cartoon and it really gives you a sense of take your time going through each frame. Here's a little boy up in the upper left-hand corner and just watching to see what's happening. Watch his mouth as you move through the next layer. And all the way down the bottom where there you are, all the green, all the throw up, all the regurgitation of all of what's been there. And then the last frame, people clapping. People giving him a mortarboard, people acknowledging him. And I'm just going to be quiet for a moment because I want you to begin to look and see, like, what is that all about? Isn't that amazing? That's a lot of how we have been relating to education, not just in the United States, not just in, certain countries. So a lot of what's happening in our world is that that's the way education has been related to fill you up. So you can learn and you can acquire knowledge and you can have skills. But when we move on to the next one, but what is the source of education really? What is it really? And what I'm offering, what I'm suggesting is that education, there's another definition. It's so powerful. Educere is to draw or lead out. It's to honor the unique expression, intelligence, and contribution of every human being. Educere is to relate to learners as human beings with unique contributions. So you just want to notice for yourself too, like I'm going to be asking some questions later on. But how does this land on you? How did this impact you? Here's a couple of follow-ups just to have you get a sense of it. So here we are. Here's this gentleman over here. And he's a professor, an instructor, and he says to all this group of people, the bird and the monkey and the penguin and the elephant and the fish and the seal and the wolf, the dog, for a fair selection, everybody has to take the same exam. So please climb that tree. And at the bottom, here's Albert Einstein again. So we've got him here. He says, everybody's a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life thinking it's stupid. You want to begin to look and see out there that's what's going on with your own family, with all the people that you know. How many people are living their lives right now like somehow or other they're not okay, they're not adequate, that they're stupid. So I want to bring to you, and this next one is a video. I'm going to compare this first, and then I'm going to show you a short video. So interesting, if you start with educare, then somehow or other it relates to educere, so that all this is there ahead of time, but it seems like it might be backwards. And I'm just suggesting that if you change it around, where you're starting with drawing out and leading, and you're starting with honoring the unique expression, intelligence, and contribution of every human being, then everything that you're learning, all this acquisition of knowledge, learning, skills, is in service of. It's in service of the unique contribution. So here is a short video, and this is an example of the way of counsel. And the way of counsel is a very old, it's indigenous Indian practice of putting people in circles, having them have an opportunity to be deeply listened to, and then watch to notice what happens. And, to my delight, there's many, many more schools that I know that are now bringing this particular practice into the school. So I want you to begin to watch. This is about 3.5 minutes. But just to watch and notice what happens when young people in educational settings are actually having the opportunity to participate. So here we go.
If people want to know me better, they can listen to me, and then if I was right next to somebody and they're like, "Hey, look, it's Joe. I know all about you. I was taking care with you and listening to your counsel." Each time we have counsel, somebody shares something that we didn't know before. And we just become closer and closer when each story is shared. And I think that's good to have. I've been at councils where people are so moved by somebody else's story, people will start crying because we all felt the same thing. We're all talking about one thing, and we all saw that in our own lives, and we were like, oh my God, we all feel the same way.
When counsel is a regular practice in a school or classroom community, students want to come to school because they never know what's going to happen in counsel that day.
In circle culture, every person is precious. Every child is a gift from the universe. And it's our job to see those gifts.
We're always talking about how we should get to know our students better so that we can teach them better. And I haven't found a better way to get to know my students than by listening to their stories. I think that's really the best way to get to know them and to start meeting their needs and to start shaping the curriculum so that it really fits them.
I think if council was never to be in this high school, I don't think I would have got to know my friends or teachers close. It wouldn't have been that bond that we have now.
Now it's a point where the teachers, the adults can kind of stand back until we're needed because the kids have created and built their relationships throughout the year.
We're building, we talk about skills for the 21st century. It's all about collaboration. And this is what council is.
I'm lecturing sometimes academically, and the students are just sitting there watching me. But then for council, it's a natural, it's conversation, there's stories, and they're learning also at the same time.
The circle promotes deeper understanding of academic content, math, science, language arts, what have you. The circles are also used for social emotional learning. I learned to listen to you, you learn to listen to me. But the third area that we've learned to look at is what we call the mysteries. And the mysteries are finding out what the felt needs, what the deep heart questions are of the children, of the teachers, of the parents, and then finding ways to shape circles so that they can explore the things of importance to them.
I want to dedicate my whole life to the people who are poor and who need stuff.
My dream is to become an environmental engineer so I can stop air pollution. I know people have counselors. I think counsel is another way to express yourself. Because when you're in counsel, it's just one person. But when you counsel, it's a bunch of people listening to what you have to say. And they're being respectful. So you don't, they don't laugh at you. They don't criticize you, which is a really good feeling.
As soon as kids go into council, they start to open up.
I've noticed from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, students who would not say anything are now very vocal.
We have students signing up for council because they want to be pulled out and they want to just, go through that experience.
We're trying to be heard through social media, through Twitter, through all of these other mediums. And suddenly you have 20 or 25 other faces looking at you saying, I'm listening from the heart and what you have to say is important. That's powerful.
Hello. I'm just going to be quiet just for a moment so that you can just take that in. Can you imagine if all of us were being educated in that way from the very beginning? So I'm going to take us into a bit of an inquiry for ourselves in terms of really looking at what we've just seen and what you've heard. I have a few more slides to go, but I just realized I wanted to stop and I'm going to show you something. So here I am, I have a jacket and I'm going to put this jacket on, but watch how I'm putting this jacket on. Do you notice what I'm doing? I'm putting this jacket on backwards. And I want you to begin to get a feeling for, like, if you were watching me, I almost thought about doing this from the beginning, but if you were watching and begin to get a sense of, like, do you kind of notice that there's something really weird? Like, I wonder why she's got that jacket on backwards. And I just wanted to do this as a real experiential sense of what I'm trying to share with you about our education. I mean, could you imagine if people were wearing clothes backwards? You can't get in and out of them very easily, for one. I mean, they look really funny. Look how funny that looks around up here and whatever. So I'm going to take it off, but I just wanted to give you that example of the fact that look what it looks like when you wear your clothes backwards. It looks funny. So anyway, I'm going to go back and share a little bit more of my screen so that you can stay with me in this next part of the okay, I think it's this one. This is the one tricky part about doing this, is that wasn't that just there? And then now I have to go back and find the other one. So hang on one second. We're going into the next place though, because I wanted to begin to show you. Oh, stop sharing for a minute here. Sorry. We're going into looking at I'll try this one. Hang on, because I've got a number of these here and I just want to make sure that they're the right ones that we're going to go next. Okay, good. Thanks. I think this is it. Now, why can't I take this to the next place? Here we go. Thank you. So I wanted you to look at it. It's a kind of a busy particular slide, but I want to begin to get a sense of, if you look over at the left and you see this bowl, and I'm suggesting that educere, to draw or lead out, is much like a context for education. So that you have the human being over there and there's this contribution to be made, but you have a container for it. And then in the middle, you can see this wonderful chopped up, all these different vegetables that are there. And that's the training and molding and teaching, having all the knowledge and the skills, they're all there, but without the bowl. So if you go over to the right-hand corner there, you can see that if you're combining them, there's a way of holding them. And that's what I think when you think about humanity, or you think about human beingness, that is an opportunity for you and I to educate for this context, a way of holding, a way of being able to see, oh, look, there's yellow vegetables there and there's red ones, whatever, but you can discern, but you also then can integrate. It provides a very, very different quality, so that you honor this unique contribution that's there. You know that there are all these wonderful things that you want to know, but it's in service of that contribution. It's a very, very different way of educating. And I just wanted to bring this into the conversation, just because this was a very funny thing that happened to me. You listen to me talking this way. This is a salad that I make, and I make a lot of salads. But I had a salad in my refrigerator, and I was getting ready to do whatever I was. And somehow or other, I had gotten the salad bowl that was in the refrigerator, and somehow it got connected and snagged, and it ended up having my salad all over the floor. And I said to myself, now that is a great example of what I'm talking about. There's no bowl, so there's no salad. But I didn't take a picture. I should have taken a picture of it with it all over the floor. But I just wanted to bring that in to you to get a sense of, it's just so amazing when you think about, you have to have a bowl in order to be able to have the salad. Anyway, we're going to go on here. So here's a reflection for you. And by the way, some of you, I asked people to bring paper and pencil. I hope you have one. If not, see if you can get one. But I'm going to ask you again to take your deep breathing, a deep breath, go into a moment of silence and reflect for yourself. What was your own education like? So if you go into the physical and the emotional and the mental and the spiritual, you just take a moment. I'll be quiet for maybe a minute or so, and just have you really look at what's present for you right now, what you think or you feel about your own education. When you put your experience right in your body right now, what do you notice your body saying to you about the way in which you were educated? What was it like, for instance, when you were really young? Do you remember? What are your emotions and your feelings about your own education? And the little voice that you have. Or when you stop and you really in an experience of that spiritual self that you are, and you look at your education and ask, like, what's about that? What about that for me? Again, part of this interaction, this inquiry that you and I are having, this wonderful exploration that we're doing together today, to realize that you're going to be leaving this conversation, in another period of time, half an hour or so. And how are we going to take what we're experiencing right now and the insights that are coming to you, so that you realize you have a lot more life to live? So how are we going to take the insights we have and really put that into humanity, and humanity rising, humanity expanding? How are we going to take what we're experiencing today here and really begin to address the whole? It's almost hard to even talk about it in terms of the conversation that Jim brought to us. It was extraordinary, because on one hand, it was like, oh my gosh, wow. And it's another, like, guess what? This is something that we need to be listening to and be responding to. So here's a whole nother place that I'm going to ask you to be able to be quiet and whatever, but what if you and I as a result of this inquiry about humanity rising and education, what if everyone grew up being listened to, heard, seen, known? All those people around the world, why do you think that somehow or other they act the way they do, or there's so much anger, so much fear? What if everyone grew up being listened to, heard, seen, and known? What if everyone knew that every human being has a unique contribution to make? There are over 8 billion human beings on this planet right now. Can you imagine if we honored their unique contribution, what our world might look like? Our education, what if our education was committed to each person discovering their unique gift to give and providing learning and practices and being listened to and listening to others from the very beginning of our educational experiences, which we're suggesting, by the way. I'm with a group of people that are really looking at the transformation of education in the United States. We're looking at from birth. How do you treat a baby? How do you listen to and watch and have that baby notice that they're being heard and they're being seen? Because they're watching every minute of the time, from the time they're born. And that we create a culture around the world. People are listened to. I am listened to. You are listened to. You are seen. We're seen. Here's another series of inquiries again, too. So take another deep breath and just begin to notice. What if at the beginning of life, we were welcomed with an openness to who we are and what unique self was ours to contribute? And that we were greeted by people who relate to us not like an empty vessel to fill, but like a human being co-inventing his or her life with our support. The family, the friends, the educators, our community members. It was just the way it is. And that they're listening in recognition that your knowledge, your skills and values and habits, beliefs are valuable and powerful. And when they are integrally connected with your human beingness, your unique contribution to give. So those are the different areas to begin to take a look at. What if? And then ask yourself the question, given your commitment to humanity rising, what might each one of us begin to look to see? And I'm committed for the rest of my life to transforming education, to really looking at what is it going to take? Because it's so many different levels, isn't it? Parenting, educators, students, administrators, the community, certainly the press, all the people who are writing things about it, and all the people that are in the news, that there is a whole different distinction of what if that's the world that we're co-creating. So here's just a number kind of thing to look at to begin sitting with too, in terms of listening is a creative force. Something quite wonderful occurs when we are listened to fully. We expand, our ideas come to life and they grow. We remember who we are. We remember who we are. Is that not a big part of humanity rising? We remember who we are. We create environments where we really give people a lot of room, a lot of space to remember who they are. So here's a reflection too. I'm going to give you a little more time to begin to look at this and to recall the last memory you have of being in a conversation with someone in which you felt truly listened to. You felt known, seen, heard, and you were sharing that same quality of listening with them. There was an energetic, a resonant connection on many levels, because you're doing that in terms of how you are in your body and how you are in your emotions. So how did you feel during that time? What were you thinking? How did your body respond? What was it like for you? What adjectives would you use to describe that experience? So I'm going to be quiet for just a while here, and I would like to have you have a chance to really ask that question. When's the last time, and what was it like for me? What is it like to be listened to? What happens to you and I when we're listened to? One of the things I want to bring back in this particular reflection is to ask the question too, what's going on, for instance, with your organs? You know, all of our organs, everything from our lungs, you know, all the things that are going on in our brain and our head, all the things that are going on in our belly, you know, in our legs, and I mean, all the whole body, and ask to see that every time we're listened to, the body expands. It grows, it develops. When you're being listened to, you're inventing, you're creating. And guess what? That has a quality of energy. And depending on how that goes, that energy can keep going on and on and on and on. And then when you gift that to someone else, then they have a sense of growing and developing. But our bodies literally do change when we are in those kinds of conversations. They also respond when we're not being listened to. There's a whole sense of the body closing down or just kind of being there very, very stiff and, you know, whatever, because there's a sense of there's no resonating energy going back and forth. So I'm just going to come back and accentuate. And a lot of people don't know this word. This is integrality. I love this word. In fact, my website is called Integrality. But it really has to do with embracing both of what we're talking about here. That when you recognize the unique contribution that's there, you see that human being, and then you're offering these different kinds of ways of learning that really accentuate that contribution. It just is amazing that you're recognizing this integral, the unique nature of humans as vital to the quality of learning. So you can imagine that when people are really, they're grounded in their unique contribution, the way in which they learn. You watch some of those young people when they were talking about the way of counsel. You get a sense of the quality of learning going on there because it's in service of them being listened to. It was like the gentleman there said, you know, I'm listening to you from my heart. I hear you. Very, very different than so much of what we're experiencing in education. So educere, it creates the space for educare to effectively be embodied by learners. So this theme that we're talking about, and the thing I really want to leave us with too, in the sense of this theme of connection, of linking, of joining. The integration is one of the most important areas to pay attention to today. And keep asking yourself that same thing. It's like, how coherent do I experience myself? And you and I know today particularly, but you know, over the years, it's because about being busy. It's about being important. And the distinction that I want to draw here too also is that when you're not being related to like your unique contribution, guess what you and I do? We go and try to find an identity. You know, we look around and that's what's going on in social media often too, is like, well, who's got the most votes and who's got the most, you know, loves or whatever it is. I want to be like them. It's like, no, 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 no. So part of it is to begin to really get a sense of how do you and I connect these different domains, the individual to be talking. So that's why I started today's conversation with looking at the physical and the emotional and the mental and spiritual intelligences. It's my relationship with me. I've started this whole relationship with my body. I'm looking and realizing that with my emotions and myself, that maybe they're my best friends. Maybe I could treat them like they are my best friends. This body is my best friend. My emotions are my best friends. And that they really teach me a lot. A lot of our education today is about, just like what they talked about in the way of counsel a little bit, like it's really all right to cry in front of your friends or your colleagues. It's really all right to be angry. You need to learn how to do those kinds of things in ways that really work. But most of our things like, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that, just do this. And you realize, look out at our world, what Jim was talking about us today, look at the United States today and see this here and ask the question, what's happening to this connection? So this whole notion of really educating so that you have this connection with yourself, me with me with you with you, then with the collective, looking at all the different people, like my relationship with all of you right now, me with others, you with others, and others with others. Connection in many different domains. So we have this connection in nature, or animals, or the energy of the universe. This connection in many other different domains, our families, our communities, the states that we live in, the cities that we live in, the countries that we live in. Ask yourself the question, like, what's my connection with all of these? And oftentimes we've chosen to be busy and then don't realize. I know I was looking back, realizing some of my life is so busy, I didn't really notice what was going on in my country to be able for me to be responsible for what's going on. So what if from an early age and throughout our education focus includes an integral quality of listening, that we include in our listening the mental, emotional, physical, spiritual intelligence. They're engaged, and that we be sure that our human spirit is engaged. What I've been doing in practicing listening over these number of years, as I've gotten more and more engaged in this, I find out that listening, there are so many different levels. And that when you're really connected to another human being over there, it's just miraculous. I can see that they're looking at me when I look at them, and they can see that I'm looking at them, and they can feel the energy connecting back and forth. It's like, oh my gosh. And yet a lot of our education is about whatever you do, don't look at people. So I'm just inviting you to begin to practice. And you have to have people, obviously, who want to practice with you too, but start with your family. Some of you have children for sure. Some of you have grandchildren. Some of you have all sorts of projects that you're doing with different age people. And to begin to ask the question, how often do we practice? One of the practices that I'd invite you to think about is you take 10 minutes or maybe 15 minutes. You have two people and each person gets 5 minutes, and that they're just there and they want to talk about something and they know that they can count on you to listen. And then the last 5 minutes would be talking a little bit about what happened there. Because I've been doing that more and more in my life. I just realized it adds so much. There's so much more fullness to my heart, so much more fullness to my way of being in the world when I am practicing this whole notion of what it means to listen and what it means to be listened to. Here's a reflection, another one too, before we're going to begin to winding up this too, but look out into the world today, the people around you, those that you see and hear about, and question, how many people walk around with the experience of their mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, those intelligences being engaged? Our intelligences are present and engaged. How many do you think? How many people walk around with an experience of being listened to, of being known and seen? And how many people are aware of the unique contribution that there is to make and are contributing it? And the last question here, you can't maybe see it all, but it really has to do with your experience of what the result of people not being listened to is. What do you notice about that with the people you work, people that you're friends with, people that are in your community or in your family? What's that like? So I'm going to be quiet again for another minute or so. Just have you really look at that. What are these questions? And use your paper to write down some of the responses that you have. What is your experience when you stop and really get quiet about the world that you and I are living in with regard to these different questions? And that perhaps part of what's going on in our world today and why people are behaving the way they are or speaking the way they are is because they grew up or they do not have a particular experience of their, not only their uniqueness, but their being known, that they're being seen, that they really have a sense that, oh my gosh, this is me and I do have a contribution to make. And I have people around me that are encouraging that. So is any wonder why our world, whether it's our country or our world that's today, you know, again, referring back to what Jim was speaking to us at the beginning, is there any wonder why things look the way they do? And that how, as we're listening to this, how we are engaging in humanity rising, and that really look at how we take what's already here and have it expand and grow and develop more and more and more. You know why? Because we are really contributing that. That's one of our contributions to make. So my question to all of us is, what are you leaving our community connection? You know, this conversation that we've been in. What are you leaving with? How might you contribute your experience of our time together to your family and friends and colleagues and neighbors? And I'm inviting you to join our community conversation. In about a moment or so, Jim and I are going to come back and we're going to have a bit of a dialogue about what we've been speaking about together today. And then from there, we're going to open it up so that you all will be able to join a community conversation. And I'm inviting all of you to do that. Also, as you can tell, you know, I'm really, it's like really, really obvious, I think, but I'm very committed to this conversation. My whole life is being dedicated to the transformation of education. So partly to see how I might be able to support you. How might we take this? One of the things I want to make sure you know is that there's a group of us who are doing this particular kind of conversation, but with the United States, to start with the United States. How do we transform education in the United States? So we've taken on an initiative. And we want to gather people who are really educating this way. But my dream, my idea is to keep expanding this. It's a great example of humanity rising. You start out with one group and then you expand. So it literally does take on the entire world. Where people in the world are really interested in, committed to having the same quality of conversation that you and I have been in. So I want to thank you so much for being together today, to being there and listening, to writing down your responses, and look to see, like, what is it that you really do want to contribute? What is your unique contribution? And how can you have other people support you in that? How do you support others? And for sure, I'm somebody that really is committed to making sure that you find out what that is and that you have an opportunity to contribute it. So thank you very much. It's just been great being here with you in our energetic field together. Okay.
Thank you, Ann. Thank you very much.
Yes, you're welcome.
Warmed my heart to have the presentation about those student circles.
Yes.
Because it took me back, since I philosophically inclined, to Plato and his notion of dialogue, that
Yes.
truth is ultimately not didactic, it's dialogic.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
People just sitting around in a circle dialoguing about whatever the issue is will find truth more deeply and quickly than sitting in front of a teacher and taking notes as if the teacher knows very much
Yes.
more than they do.
Yes. Yes, well, you can see too why there's so many saluters in our line. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's a lot of what I was doing with my work with corporations, is having the leader of the organization that I was working with begin to realize they did not need to tell people what to do. What they needed to do is to listen very deeply and listen to what the contributions are of all these people that are working with them, and then allow them to contribute it. And oh my gosh, look what happened. They started to really weave together a very different whole context of what their business was. Their business got to be a lot better, et cetera, et cetera. So it's like, that's a great example. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I think I'd like to start with you telling us a little bit more about your own story and your background, and how did you come to delve so deeply into the educational domain? What triggered your passion for this? What experiences did you have?
It's so funny, isn't it? I want everybody to know this too. It's like, God, that's such a great question to ask someone. It's like, you mean we could talk about it?
Please.
No, I will. I started really early. I was at the University of Michigan, and I was doing psychology, and I was in a children's psychiatric hospital. So I started out with teaching there, and then moving into all these different areas, after that. But to be with particularly young people who are said that somehow or other they're having emotional problems or whatever, but to listen to them and find out they're actually really incredible human beings, and they're butting up against all of the role rules and all the stuff whether it's the family or the culture. And so to be able to really listen to them, then they have a chance to be able to come out, even themselves. So all the labels that we put on people, I think, is something that we really need to look at. But from the University of Michigan, I went and I ran a school for a number of years in Hawaii. Then I did with some teaching at the university.
Was it a special school in Hawaii?
Hawaii was a residential treatment program where they had all the students were living there, and then they had all this wonderful support. But I was heading up the school so that we did all of it together. It was very coherent. It was really a very fortunate experience for me. But I think part of what's beginning to happen, I started doing a lot more meditation and yoga to get more and more into my own body. But I remember starting to really listen to the universe. So one of the major things that happened to me with this, I think, was noticing, go do this course or go do this. And I remember spending 10 days in the Death Valley here in California on a vision quest. And I was there, and it was I think it was like it was about February, whatever, but it was pretty okay there, but it started snowing on me, and I'm all by myself, I'm doing this stuff by myself. And the end result was I'm sobbing after my 10 days. I'm sobbing because the universe kept saying to me, education's not keeping its promise. It's not keeping its promise. And I said, oh. And so this is probably like 30 years ago. And I then went and got into a dissertation, and my whole dissertation was studying, and I studied 9 programs, 5 in the United States, the Montessori, the Waldorf, the Friends Quaker, the Sri Atmananda. I mean, there were just a lot of different programs that were there. They were promising, we're going to educate people on their bodies, the physical, the emotional, the mental, and the spiritual. They took young kids from the kindergarten all the way through the 12th grade, and they really were working with them in the community to accentuate how do you develop those intelligences, how do you integrate them. So that was a huge opening for me, obviously, because I began to watch, and then I interviewed all of these seniors, the 9 of them that were part of these programs. 4 of them were in India and 5 in the United States. And I listened to these young people telling me about what their experience was like with each one of these and their school. I mean, there was nothing going on about other than them being themselves and sharing with me what it was like. And I was so moved. I did my whole dissertation. So I have a dissertation that I wrote called Integral Education from Conception through High School Graduation. And obviously in that experience of being with the schools, spending a lot of time with them, writing up, it was a huge opening. And then I took some of that into these companies. That's where I took a lot of the company, the knowledge that I had into these different companies. And there was all international companies. So they were all over the world that I went, and noticed there were so many places where people had, this is what education is, and this is what you're supposed to teach, and whatever, rather than what we're talking about. I just feel that some of our, just get more and more into it. And then I've related a lot more to a lot more people. So right now I'm part of a group of people where we really are committed to transforming education in the United States. That's the next phase. So we're really moving on. How do we bring a gathering of people together? Those of you that are already doing a lot of the same kind of work, of really honoring the unique contribution. But I think I've said quite a bit. I just think you can tell that it's something that's really in my body. Yeah.
Now, I'm interested that you called your body of work integral education, where you
Integral,
study
yeah.
Wilber and integral theory and
Yes, yes.
all of that.
Yes, I added that, but see, the programs that I went to, most of them called their programs integral education.
Yeah.
Integral, they'll call it whatever, but then I got the word integrality, which I've been, like I said, I really love, so.
Integrality.
I know, don't you think that's a great word? Integrality? Yeah, anyway.
Now, just as your own analysis, since you're so deeply immersed, as you compared Montessori and Waldorf and the Quakers and so forth and so on, was there a particular, and also in the United States and international,
Yeah.
was there a particular pedagogical style or school that, in your judgment, is, the top way to educate amongst, like Montessori, Waldorf, Quaker, etc., some of the Hindu schools?
Yeah.
What would be your evaluation of them?
Yeah, I would not say that. I would never go to say one is better than the other. But what I would go and say is that each one of them have their own unique, particularly like a community, and the way in which people relate to each other. And they have their own particular way of being, and that people would need to choose. So that's how I would say it, because I felt like all of them were educated. Every single one of those seniors had had this extraordinary experience. And then their unique contributions were so much more obvious, because that's how they were related to. How do you really grow and develop and then add all this education afterward? So I would never, and I don't know why I would. I know a lot of people really love certain things. I think, for instance, with Waldorf, there's some things that they did, for instance, where the teacher was from kindergarten all the way to 6th grade. They stayed together with them. Those are ideas, but I think the community needs to really choose that, because maybe for some people that works really well and others don't. So I would not be somebody who would say, oh, you should choose this one over this one.
Yeah. Well, our two boys, we put them through Waldorf, and I would say it was mixed.
Yeah. Yeah, well, there's a mix too. Yeah, isn't that? Well, I think it's true. We've got to be really careful that people go like this. They get very, very protective of their thing, and they think this is it, So I think part of it is to keep opening and realizing, no, if you really are looking for your unique contribution, your unique self, then it's really important that you get really in touch with that is, so you know yourself, what it is.
Right. And, I think a related matter, we would love to have your comment, is the partnership that's required between the school and the parents and the family and the community, because oftentimes you have kids coming to a good school but from a broken home, where there's conflict and maybe some abuse of some kind or another, or vice versa, where they have a very supportive home but the school is inept and broken in some way. Having raised two boys into adulthood, my sense of education evolved from thinking a school was there to kind of educate, to a realization that we as parents set the first imprint, and the activity between the family and the school and then the peers.
Yes.
The children. That sort of trilateralization is what really constitutes, in a holistic way, the kind of educative process that they end up with, for good or for worse, for better or for worse. And then they're adults, and on they go.
Yes. It's a great inquiry, what you're speaking about too. So part of what I have done already, and what I want to continue more and more and more, is there is a whole notion of parent education. And, be able to really, I don't know whether it would be like in partnership with people that are, doctors or nurse, whatever, so that anybody that's thinking about having a child, that they, they're introduced to a particular way of looking at what that really means. Because, in the past, I think, particularly how I was raised, is that people were having children because they wanted to have those children represent them, or they wanted to do with their children what they didn't get to do with their own, their own parents or something. And so part of it's to really ask this question, because it's a great one with regard to humanity, to really looking at humanity and growing humanity. That if people are just having children because they think it's a really good idea, or they can hardly wait to mold them and train them into, these people that they can really think, oh, that's my son or that's my daughter, et cetera, et cetera. So I think part of it is to have these distinctions. And that's what I was saying earlier about the more you and I are really in sync, in coherency with ourselves, we can begin to really get a feeling for what is discernment all about? How do you begin to look to see, like, well, what are you creating? It's like the whole thing with that bowl that I talked about earlier. Most people do not have context. They really don't get a sense of, like, there's a container. So parents have this incredible opportunity to be these fabulous containers for the unique contribution for their children. But that means they have to look at the baby, and rather than thinking, oh, I hope he's going to be a millionaire. Oh, I hope she's going to, no, to look over there and ask the baby, who are you and what are you up to? And then watch to see what happens. Because I've been doing some of this with some of people that I have had kids. It's just really being able to look over there and let that baby know, because that baby's right smack there, to let that baby know, by the way, I see you. And that baby, that energetic flow goes. So I think for me, it's got to do with parent education, that maybe what we do before people become parents, or that every educational program has parent education. So in order for parents to have their children being in the school, guess what? And I think of it in the form of the what is it called? The World Cafe, where you really have all these opportunities in small 4-person groups, and then in the large group to be able to really have some, I think, some in-depth conversations, and to listen to other people, and to begin to really get a sense of being part of a community. So that's one of the things about those 9 programs that I studied. Every one of those programs, the 4 in India and the 5 in the United States, had extraordinary parent communities where they were really in touch with what was going on there, where it related to one another, et cetera. So I think for what I would say, a lot more parent education to be able to really have people get a sense of it, but very easygoing. It's not like, I got something to teach you and I'm going to show you kind of thing. It's really having them be questioning of what they're really up to, like, why are they having the children? And then really look at how do you have them and their unique contribution keep coming out. So that's what I'd say.
Yeah. Well, let's turn to the challenge that you set for yourself of reforming education in the United States. We're in a culture war in the US around education.
Yeah.
And do you educate children around critical race theory? Do you expose children to the dynamic transformations in gender? Do you talk about God in the schools? Do you teach yoga in the schools? And the school systems and the school boards, which up to the last few years have basically trundled along, in the backwater of public concern, have now become battlegrounds.
Mm-hmm.
So we'd just love to have you comment on the current status of education in America, and how you, as a professional educator, how are you entering into this morass?
Yeah.
Because there's many, it's so politicized, and I would say weaponized now.
Yeah.
It's hard to know what to really do. So how are you teaching this?
Yeah. Well, that's one of those kind of questions you're going to go, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for even asking that question. But the truth, this is the truth now, and this is where we've just started, because I've been looking at it like on very individual levels. But what's true for me with this, what we're calling the TIAS, the Transformation of Education in the United States, the initiative, that's what we're calling us, starting very, very slowly and watching to see what we're looking for is shining a light on what is working. what is working in the United States. So for instance, when you saw the video there, I don't know what most people would say if they saw the way of counsel, and they would say, look what's going on in this school. You know, some parents might say, no, 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 no. So I really have to honor whoever's out there, whatever their point of view is, whatever they're going like this is like, I would not be tackling that right now at all. We may be able to get slowly but surely get slow world cafes coming in here where we'd have people that have different points of view, but teaching and educating. How do you have a difficult conversation? How do you disagree in a way where you are coherent? And rather than pointing fingers or getting all angry, which I do, by the way. So it's not like I don't do that. You know, sometimes I just want to wring people's necks kind of thing, but you know, you just don't. But the point being for me is I think it's a very slow process, that I think it's going to be a number of years, and that I'm not going in there and tackling that particular thing. I'm waiting for people to maybe make a request, because I know there are people who are kind of like, ooh, but they've never really ever engaged in some of these. So to start slowly with them as an example. And you and I know that there are a lot of people who are operating a particular way where they do not read hardly anything other than what's right in front of them in terms of what they see. So that's the facts as an example, or that somehow or other it's the way it is. And then to begin to question, I would be questioning people, you know, like, why is that, do you think? Because I think a lot of that for you and I, we know, is there's a lot of resistance because they've had childhoods. They have had so many years of not being listened to. So they have to really go to where they know. They don't want to go to where they don't know. And I think that's another part of our education. How do we really provide opportunities to be in these places where they don't know, and it's really fine? It's a place of learning. And I think that's part of what our schools have done a lot of, is to make not knowing, you know, like there's something wrong with you. Or I think that's, you know, that's not education to me. So that's, I know I probably want the answer, like I got all the fixes going to it, but the truth is I have to go really in sync with where someone is. I don't want to go and try to get them to think something other than they do, but I am going to be asking a lot of questions about, like, why is that way, do you think? That's one thing I want to say too, is part of our TS is we're going to gather people, maybe 70 people representing different programs from the United States, people that have been practicing, whether it's the way of counsel or all these other places they've been doing where the kids in the program are just really thriving, you know, and then just really having a documentary. So we will be having all people videotaping this gathering, and then we're going to be creating a documentary called What If Education Was Like This? So, and then we want to go to McGill Cardona, of course, you know, our Secretary of Education, want to go to all the secretaries of education in the different states, or finding groups of people that are at least open to having this kind of conversation about what life might be like if we educated this way.
You know, Kim Kerrigan is bringing in also a other dimension of the challenge in terms of the impact on education of, you know, big pharma and big business and the prescription drugs and you know, the mass shootings and everything. So our kids are not only battlegrounds for the culture wars.
Exactly.
Kids are victims of corporate interests and the refusal of the United States to engage in any meaningful gun control. And these poor little beings, you know, so innocent and so unformed, but so curious and open to the world, are literally under assault.
Yes.
At multiple levels. And, you know, the fact that you're in the middle of it, Anne, as you are trying to demonstrate what education should be like, is quite an extraordinary act of courage, I would say.
Yeah, thank you. One thing I'll say to everybody listening, though, you know when you really are listening to oneself, when you are really listening to oneself. This message, like I said, when it was there in the desert, 30 years ago, hello, get going. It's come back. This came back maybe 4 or 5 years ago. Anne, what are you doing now about education, Anne? So I'm saying, please listen to yourselves. And part of it is the fact that I am scared and that I am anxious and that I am not knowing. And I am sometimes like this going all over. And there's a little voice in my head that goes, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. And then you realize, no, I talked to someone like you, or there's a whole core group that I have that I just so love these people because they're there. And what's happening when we want to quit or we want to do something else, like, guess what? No, I just want you to hear me. And then the minute I say those things, or I have scatological language that comes up and I say that my friend listens to me, that energy disappears. And then guess what? I am all right back up, lined up, going. So I think I'm encouraging everybody listening, make sure you have a group of people that are really willing to listen to the depth of however you feel, however you are, because if you really get that heard, that energy disappears. It actually goes away. And I think you must have had that experience many, many times too, but we don't always use it. And sometimes we get in a little spiral there, like, oh, you know, it's like, oh, I think I better go have myself be listened to pretty quick. So I would say community is really important.
Yeah. Well, Anne, thank you so much. You are a paragon of you embody the audacity of hope.
Yeah.
Face of
Wow. Well,
real challenges that are
yeah.
afflicting not only in the United States,
No.
In Europe and around the world. Our young people are under siege and highly stressed. And in Asia, it's even worse. I mean, they have a totalitarian education system where you sit down, take notes, memorize the information, and then, as you said, you throw up, you regurgitate that, and that's the thing that's allowed. So it's important, everyone, to understand that the United States has some challenges, but at least we've got Waldorf and Montessori and the Quakers and other modalities of education. In many parts of Asia, there's none at all. And the educational system is broken at fundamental levels, and our young people are not being served, and they carry the future. If you had to identify one of the major code red issues of our time, it's what, Anne, you're working on. So I just want to end our call by thanking you for everything that you're doing and the integrity of your spirit and the passion with which you're throwing your life and creative intelligence into one of the most crucial issues of our time. So thank you.
Yes. Before we go, I just have one thing that I want to make sure we end with after what you just said, because it's really important. This is a great thing about education, is to notice where you were speaking from over these last few minutes, and to realize it's very important that we point out all the things that are there that are not working. However, it's just as important to make sure we keep accentuating what is. And I think for me, with social media, with our news programs and whatever, it's way too easy to go, and there's a lot of schools and educations in the United States today who are doing the way of counsel. LA, for instance, the school district there are a whole bunch of public schools that are doing that same thing. So I want to make sure we educate and accentuate what really is working too. Otherwise, there's both.
Totally.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Yeah.
Right. Well, Anne, thank you. And while I'm doing my close, there people would like to be in touch with you. So if you could put your email in the chat box, and then Anne's going to be joining the after chat, everyone. So please, those of you who are educators or interested in more in what she's doing, because in a world of chaos, it's the islands of coherence we need to focus our attention on and what's working. And that's what Anne is bringing into the U.S. educational system. So that is very, very important. You're all welcome to join the after chat. You'll see the link in the chat box. You received it in your Zoom reminder. And that'll bring us to a close for today. And then on Monday, we're going to be circling back to the UAP disclosure issue with a frontline report from Washington by Steve Bassett. who is the only official lobbyist on UAP matters in Washington. He'll be giving us the latest updates on what's happening in the capital of the United States on this matter. So thank you again, Anne. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a
Thanks for having me. Okay.
fun
Bye-bye.
day. Bye-bye.